So it's now my pleasure to welcome Ben Uyeda, our 2018 Innovator in Residence. Thank you.
Thank you. We need to turn that mic off there. Thank you. All right, so a few disclaimers before we get started. I used words like designer and entrepreneur pretty interchangeably. The only real distinction I make in between them is design is normally when I want to make one thing that's good, and entrepreneurship or business is when I want to try to figure out how to make it happen again and again and again. But they're both nonlinear processes and often involve making something out of nothing. So another disclaimer is I also get a lot of young entrepreneurs asking me about what they should do or how they should get started. And I don't think I can tell you that, or really anyone. All I really hope to do is to sort of possibly encourage you to get started sooner than you might have otherwise. And then if you do get started, hopefully some of my experiences will help you when you inevitably get in over your head. So tonight, though, I'm going to really focus on inspiration and progress. As designers and entrepreneurs, we need inspiration in a few ways. We need ideas for products or businesses. And when we try to implement those, we need it as fuel to sort of overcome the inevitable challenges that get thrown in our way. So if we find it, harness it, and use it to elevate ourselves into positions of influence and power, hopefully we'll take on the question as to whether or not our efforts are contributing to some sort of positive change, some sort of progress. And it's this question of progress, it's the tough one, and it's something I've always kind of struggled with. You know, my intentions have always been mostly good. Sometimes they're a little bit, I want to make money. But when I really ruthlessly dissect and question the actual impact I'm having, and not the kind of indirect one that comes from good intentions, I've often found a lot of flimsy arguments and for real positive change. And I think those we've all kind of seen those a little bit. It's kind of the TV show Silicon Valley so eloquently skewers them when they kind of make fun of everybody ending their pitch with, and to make the world a better place. And I try not to be too cynical, because I don't think people's intentions are false. I just think that they take a little shortcut at the end and realize that if they get into influence, they'll kind of patch it all together at the very end. So I'm going to share what I've learned so far and some of the stories that have shaped where my thoughts are today. So I grew up in a family with very limited economic means, and design was a way to create access to things we otherwise couldn't afford. All four of us kids shared the same room, and my mom made these really cool fold-out mattresses so that we could have a playroom that also transformed into a sleeping dorm. Me and my brother read Huckleberry Finn at a pretty young age, and we made a raft out of 2-liter soda bottles and sailed it down our local river. So design was just about problem solving and access. Then I went to architecture school and was presented with a more glamorous aspect of design. Design was conceptual, esoteric, and very stylish. And the focus at that time was on elite cities and brands like Guggenheim and Prada. And those things felt a little too fancy to myself and some of my like-minded classmates. So we became really interested in sustainable design. And it wasn't because we were ethically superior to our classmates. It was also sort of a lifestyle fit. You know, I saw a tendency where the kids that grew up in the suburbs and had a more sort of a less culturally sophisticated upbringing were interested in these things that had more of a sense of tangible goodness. So we gravitated towards that, and upon graduating, started an architecture firm, and we built houses like this. So we knew that single-family houses are the most common building type in America. We decided to focus on that and had a pretty simple plan. We can make a difference if we make better houses. If we design a lot of houses, we can make a big difference. And so we started the architecture firm, ZeroEnergy Design, and designed high-performance homes. We designed solar-powered, super-insulated homes that produced as much energy as they used. A lot of the same technologies that you'll see over in your new building on the other side of campus. And it was great. Work was getting published, we were winning awards, and our client list was getting more prestigious. And yeah, it was good times. But these homes were also quite expensive and often second homes for our clients. So while the technology was sustainable and progressive, the application for it was a little less noble than what I would have liked. They were kind of like hydrogen-powered like Hummers or like a hybrid Escalade. You know, it's like nice technology, not the most efficient application of it. So our conscience was telling us to design sustainably, but our business model was pushing us to primarily deliver it to the wealthy. And this is the issue with design as a custom service, and it wasn't unique to our firm. In fact, the average house designed by a custom architect is more than twice the sale price of the average American home. So, of course, we did pro bono work. We actually won a competition to design affordable houses in New Orleans for residents that were displaced by Hurricane Katrina. But this isn't what we always did. This was the exception, and it came with financial consequences. It takes just as long to design an affordable house as it does an expensive house. You just don't get paid as much, if anything at all. So we were doing good work, but just mostly for wealthy people. So this doesn't mean I'm not proud of it. I'm proud of the firm we created. I'm proud of the homes we designed, but I wanted my career to be about creating new opportunities for people, not catering to those that already have them. So I don't subscribe to trickle-down economics. So why was I designing for the most privileged and then hoping the progressive parts would eventually trickle down? Sustainable design is important. The research and industry leadership that our firm provided is essential. But it just didn't feel exactly like what I personally wanted. And I just kept thinking that I was designing things that my family could have never afforded. So what to do about it? So I began thinking about how could I learn or earn a living designing for people who can't afford to hire me. And I remembered that one of my college professors would always tell me that architects don't make buildings, they make drawings that instruct and motivate. And I realized, well, drawings are a type of media, and media can be distributed on the internet to great effect. And instructing and motivating lots of people on the internet could be impactful and lucrative. So we looked at where Americans got their home designs, and we saw that architects design less than 5% of the homes in America. And since we didn't quite have enough capital to become a production builder, we decided to focus on stock house plans. And we realized that all homes in America already are prefab. Because that was one of the things that people asked us, why don't you just start like a prefab home company? I keep reading about them in magazines and articles, and it seems like it's going to be a big deal. There's no coming modular revolution. It's not going to happen. So unless you go into the woods with an axe and make a house from scratch, like hand-hewing everything out of a log, your house is prefab. Windows are a product, insulation is a product, doors are a product, your faucets are a product. So for a real effective modular home company to exist, they'd have to be massively vertically integrated and way bigger than any car company. And when you think about the fluctuations in the housing market, that wouldn't be a very wise distribution of capital. We also knew that media is a powerful tool, and consumer expectations of design are shaped by it. So I was in Africa pretty recently out of college, and I was designing solar-powered houses outside of Lagos, Nigeria as part of a consulting project. And like any well-intentioned young designer, I didn't want to be culturally imperialistic. So I said, well, you know, I don't want to just start designing. I'd feel more comfortable if we put together a focus group, get to know the people that are going to be in the demographic that's going to live here, and let's see what they really want out of this housing. Trying to sort of, you know, check all the boxes and really do it the right way. So we put together this focus group and, you know, started off real simple. I'm like, well, what do you think the houses should look like? The lady in front raises her hand. She says, oh, I think they should look like the houses on Wisteria Lane. Now, Wisteria Lane is the fictitious street in the TV show Desperate Housewives. And I was like, well, yeah, of course. Like, it's not the famous architects that are dictating taste, it's media. And America exports a lot of media, gets consumed all over, and that's actually what's driving taste around the world, much more so than any sort of experts. And it was a great realization moment where the greatest architects in the world are not directly shaping consumer expectations for the built environment. It's not. And I think a lot of professionals kind of know that, and I think there's that kind of like snobbery, because it's really a defensiveness. They know they're not really resonating and impacting at the mainstream, so instead they just kind of sneer at it and make fun of it. So we were kind of thinking, well, we know this media thing could reach a lot of people, and we know that would be the way to probably be impactful. So we created a business plan and won a bunch of business plan competitions and went out and raised just right around $1 million in investment. And we created a company called Free Green that gave away free blueprints for affordable, energy-efficient homes. And we used architectural construction documents as a type of media that was monetized by making product recommendations and specifications right into the drawings. So you could go on our site, you could see all these different designs, you could pick one that that resonated with you, and you could even take a tour through it and click on the different product recommendations throughout the whole house, switch out different design options. And we didn't just provide aesthetic design options, we'd actually taught people how their HVAC systems and how the energy systems worked in their homes. Another really cool thing that we did is we did energy modeling, so that if you entered the zip code of wherever you were planning on building a home, you could see how our product recommendations versus the basic code requirements would save you money every month as a way of sort of validating those energy choices. Produced all sorts of designs we didn't like, designs we did like, and it was a really interesting challenge in trying to figure out how to sort of make design media modular and appropriate for all the different microclimates that are around the country. So here's an example of how we would take one design and then separate like the passive solar shades that would control the amount of sun coming into the building. And we'd create these little sizing charts so that you could just look at these and quickly see and size them for different zones in the country. So we very quickly became one of the largest supplier of home designs in the country. Most companies were selling these kind of house plans for about $800 to $1,000. So when you're free, you very quickly take over traffic and make them angry. And we were reaching thousands of more people than we ever could as an architecture firm. But then 2008 happened, and the housing market crashed, and advertising budgets for the construction industry died. And the fund, which was a fund that was actually investing in a whole bunch of the US solar companies that all got into trouble around then, went under, and we didn't get about half of the investment that we were counting on. So in 2007, I thought I was pretty smart. I thought because I could throw together a PowerPoint and get people to give me a ton of money, that my ideas were inherently valuable. In 2008, I realized I wasn't that smart, and I was really just dependent on a whole bunch of favorable conditions. And yeah, it was a great check. You think, and I always catch entrepreneurs now is that they celebrate raising money. And it's like, well, that's kind of at the part where you're just about to have a lot of sleepless nights and where you're starting to give over control to other people. I get that it's a benchmark and it feels like a point of celebration, but in retrospect, it was often, or in my experience, it has been one of the turning points where things are about to get really hectic. So it was tough, but we survived. We lost some employees, which is incredibly hard, especially when you're building something together and you really approach this as like a relationship. You think you're going to accomplish all of each other's dreams together as this like small little intrepid band of characters. And then things outside of your control happen and you realize how helpless you really are sometimes. But we built it back up, survived, and eventually actually got acquired by one of the larger media companies in construction. So I was a little burnt out, but still a little too young to retire, so I had to figure out what to do next. And I wasn't really sure, but I knew that I wanted to be able to do it without investors or a large team. Investors, because they kind of pull your puppet strings a lot, and a team because it's like having a family before you're ready to support them. And it's something it's something I find really concerning talking to young entrepreneurs. It's like, it's okay, it's all, fun and games when you're used to living on sofas. And it's why I actually encourage people to take the most risk when they're the youngest, before family and all that kind of normalizes you and makes you a little more conservative. But the minute you take on employees or stuff like that, you really got to take it as a serious thing of these are people that you're responsible for taking care of, and not be so cavalier and gung-ho. And the same thing that the same personality trait that might make you great at raising money and going through, an incubator or pitching to VCs might actually make you not a great caretaker of the people that work for you. So the only other thing that I knew that I wanted was I wanted to design things that, again, my family could have afforded when I was a kid. So these were the thoughts in the back of my mind when I had a beer with a friend who's a furniture designer. And he complained, he said, it's impossible to design American-made affordable furniture. And that the reality of the industry is you have to do sort of high-end boutique work until you get real famous, and then like a big company will do like a knockoff foreign sweatshop-made version, and they'll put your name on it. He was very, very negative on it. So I bet him. I bet him that I could get 1,000 pieces of American-made furniture made out of real materials, delivered around the country for less than their IKEA counterpart. Now, he took the bet because he believed that would be impossible for me to design something and deliver something as cheap as IKEA. IKEA has factories, ships, more than 100,000 employees, and it's all aimed at making the manufacturing and delivery of furniture cheap and affordable. So, and I had myself and like a circular saw and a drill. So he believed that in order to get design to the masses, you had to turn it into a product. And he knew that to make a product, you had to spend time and money on prototyping, manufacturing, shipping, and marketing. He made the bet because he didn't see the shortcut. But I knew I was just going to make a YouTube video. So this is the bucket stool video. I posted it on YouTube and shared it on Facebook. It's a very simple design. It can be made for less than $5. You can use a handsaw. You can use some broken branches that you find in the yard. You can use any old bucket. I've seen people use broomsticks. Pour in a little bit of concrete, let it sit for a bit, and pop it right out. You can sand it a little bit, but you don't really have to. And I think it's a little bit nicer than its more expensive IKEA counterpart. And this was way before I had much of a social media audience. So I really just shared it with friends and family, but a lot of them shared it too. And people around the world started posting proof that my design idea had reached their physical reality. So the project has now been built on 6 different continents, and several small businesses have emerged that produce and sell this design, which is awesome. So I won the bet pretty easily. But more importantly, I saw that giving away small, simple ideas could be a business. So I was producing media that motivated, instructed, and resulted in economic activity. In order for people to build this project, they often had to buy a dowel or a bag of concrete or a bucket or a saw to cut the dowel. And because I didn't have the infrastructure to provide them with materials, I had to direct them elsewhere. And so my lack of resources resulted in the opportunity. Because I didn't have the infrastructure to compete with IKEA, I had to hijack it from somewhere else. And I chose Home Depot. So I designed projects from materials that are universally available due to the trucks, warehouses, and stores that Home Depot pays for. And my designs in the form of digital media content cause people to go to their stores and buy stuff. And that's also where I get recognized the most. It's always like Home Depot. I think it's the context of the thing. And because I didn't have the marketing budget to compete with Target, I had to hijack viewers from somewhere. And I targeted BuzzFeed in the beginning and Pinterest. And I found that because I was creating original media content, large platforms were eager to share it with their millions of viewers. And once my media content was being broadly distributed, I was able to sign sponsorship deals with brands like Home Depot, Ryobi, and Quikrete. So once again, I'm publishing design as a type of media and monetizing it as a type of marketing. And so I began sharing more design ideas. So we try to focus on designs that promote healthy and productive lifestyles, like indoor gardens that allow you to grow food even in a small apartment. And this is one that we made that actually waters itself, a nice little planter. I like this one too. It's still in my house. or like durable, sturdy pieces of furniture that can be made affordably and will last a long period of time. And we just kept producing more and more pieces. We basically furnished our house and my friends' houses and their friends' houses. We try to use industrial materials in an interesting way. This is pipe furniture. So we're using plumbing pipe that's made out of cast iron and steel and just 2x12s from Home Depot. And it was a blast. Every once in a while, though, we just designed kind of silly stuff that we thought was cool. And it was always, I was always really surprised at like which things sort of took off. So I posted this and borrowed my friend's dog, Fletcher. And like, not that much longer, somebody posted this on Instagram, which I thought was just epic in every possible way. They totally outdid us with the staging. I mean, a hairless cat is really social media gold. And we laughed, and we didn't think of anything of it. And then they kept tweaking design and making it a little bit better and experimenting with different materials. And then actually, just the other day, I saw that they're launching a Kickstarter where they're actually making really affordable cardboard ones that flat pack, because they had so many people ask them, hey, where'd you get that? How do we get one? So they are having these like laser cut and produced out of cardboard. They can be shipped in like a big envelope, and they're turning it into a little side hustle in business. This is one of my favorite projects. It's a concrete pendant lamp. People always say it's going to be so heavy, but it's really not that much heavier than any sort of glass pendant lamp. But we made the forms for it out of, again, a 2-liter soda bottle and then a smaller water bottle right inside of it. And it's funny, too, because if you go into, like, if you search concrete lamps, any place that sells them, they're like hundreds of dollars. They're really expensive. So it's kind of awesome that we could make one for about $10. And we just kept producing furniture that made sense to the way we lived. Another interesting thing that we experimented with was 3D printing. And at the time, this is when like all the maker bots and the 3D printers were becoming popular. But they were like a few $1,000s. And they don't, at first they didn't really work that good. They've gotten a lot better now. And we said, well, what's the simpler, we like the idea of being able to distribute design digitally. People download it, print something, and then have something there. That's a really cool and powerful idea. We're like, well, people don't have 3D printers yet, so instead of waiting for that to happen, let's figure out how to do the same thing with the printers they do have. So we made these sort of templates that you could print in your inkjet printer, fold and glue them up, and make all sorts of little knickknacks, in this case candles, or we did larger things like coat hooks and little floating shelves. And we began to experiment more and more, not just with what we were making, but how we were making it. Some of our most popular videos ever are our experiments with using Legos to form concrete. This is the coffee maker I use at my Boston loft. And as of the response, yeah, it's been pretty amazing. I think as of now, our YouTube videos have been viewed more than 60 million times in more than 50 different countries. And from a workflow perspective, we get to design new things every week, which is great for the curiosity and imagination. I love architecture, but it's and every once in a while I'll still design a building, but it's a long process that really is drawn out over a way too long of a period. And one of the things people always ask me is like, oh, should I go into this type of design or this type of design? And my answer is normally that the subject matter of what you're doing, whether it's business or design, is probably less important than the pace at which you like to work. There's some people I know that are incredibly detail-oriented, and they want to do one thing, do it perfectly, and not do anything else until that's perfect and done, and then do the next thing. In that case, designing a building might be perfect for your temperament. If you're someone that has a whole bunch of ideas and just wants to get one out to about 80 or 90% and then move on to the next one, designing the way I do might make a little more sense, because it tends to be how I think. So this is a project that we did recently that I'm particularly proud of. I was talking to some architecture students, and one of them told me he wanted to go into furniture making, but he didn't have access to a CNC machine. Now, a CNC machine is it's like a robotic arm that can cut things. They're really cool, and you can make really awesome stuff with it. And so I get it. Like, if you search for CNC architecture or CNC design, you'll see this crazy, space age looking stuff. So I could understand why a student would want to do that. But it kind of was like his idea that he couldn't do anything until he had this really expensive machine, I felt was like a bit limiting. So I took that as a challenge, and I wanted to see what I could do without them. So this table is made from a single sheet of plywood from Home Depot. The only tools you need are a circular saw and a drill. And the materials cost less than $45, which makes it about 1/3 the price of an IKEA table of a similar size. In fact, you can get the power tools and the materials to build this table for less than the IKEA table. And since it's plywood instead of particle board, it's stronger and will last longer. So could we design a cooler table with a CNC machine? Yes, and we will, but doesn't mean we have to wait and do nothing in the meantime. So I get it. Like, we all want amazing and perfect, but I'm saying let that happen on the second or third try. It doesn't have to happen always right out of the gate. So we live in a world full of particle board furniture, Taco Bells, Applebee's, strip malls. We're a real long way from having to worry about perfection. Perfection requires opportunity. You know, progress is always available. And for me as a designer, this progress over perfection approach it's more fun too. I can have an idea on a Thursday, sketch it out on Friday, build it and film it on a Saturday, edit the video on Sunday, and by Monday, it could have reached hundreds of thousands of people. And the business result is also pretty cool. It's marketing content with a clear call to action, and people choose to watch it instead of fast-forwarding through it. We're making commercials that people actually want to watch and that teach them something. But still, you know, my more entrepreneurial friends are always asking, why don't I develop products and sell them? They go, you have this, this expanding online audience, just make a couple products and sell it to those people. Just keep hammering them, keep spamming them, and you can make a ton of money. And they worry that I'll run out of good ideas and I won't have capitalized enough on the ones that I already gave away. So you have a large following, why don't you make and sell stuff? 2 reasons. From a business perspective, it's lower risk and higher return to create media content that reaches millions of people than it is to spend money on patenting, manufacturing, distribution, and marketing. Creatively, I spend my time with new ideas, not value engineering old ones. Quite simply, this model allows my fiscal future to be firmly grounded in my creative present. If I were to develop products, I would spend months, if not years, working on ideas that I already had, and any new ideas would be distractions to try to finish those old ideas. And with this business model, I get to bet on intellectual abundance instead of scarcity, which I think, for me, brings out the best in myself. And I found, at least for me, that the faster I put ideas out there, the quicker new ones rush in to fill their place. So I get emails all the time about people who are, quote, stealing my ideas and making my designs and selling them on Etsy or eBay, or even making their own videos of them. And I always say, no, it's great. Like, I like it. Like, if people are spending time making and selling my ideas, I get the benefit from learning how they improve them. I basically get free crowdsourced R&D. It's also incredibly beneficial when I go to my sponsors and say, not only did people watch my content and take action from it, other content producers watched it and took action from it. I remember when I was doing a lot of the concrete stuff, somebody sends me this thing, hey, these people are making all your concrete products and selling them. I'm like, cool. So I checked them out, and they're like, oh, that's awesome. They're using the same products that I had recommended. So when I'm renegotiating with my concrete sponsors, I say, okay, not only can we take into account all those people, we can take into account professional people that are now buying your material in bulk and using it. So yeah, please steal my ideas and make money off of them. Because the surest way to run out of new ideas is to hold on too tightly to old ones. So I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs about it, and it's always like the minute they get an idea, they run out and say they have to talk to an IP lawyer. And I get it. Like, if you develop some code or something scientifically that's protectable, go for it. But I've heard so many people spend a lot of money on patent attorneys that really wasn't necessary, and they just have this thing that they end up doing nothing with that cost them a few $1,000s. So So even though the last 4 years launching this endeavor they've definitely been the most satisfying in my career, there's still times where I felt a little insecure with being a YouTuber. I imagine my architecture peers who are like really cool people. They got the black rimmed glasses and the turtlenecks and all that stuff. And there's like, so master's degree and then YouTube. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. They saw it as sort of a little bit of a spiraling, regressive descent. But overall, I've been comfortable with my choice. But it did cross my mind that perhaps I'd given up on possibilities of more traditional peer recognition, and that my focus on affordability would feel nice ethically, but would eventually limit the kind of things I would get to experiment with. Maybe I won't ever get to experiment with the CNCs because I'm so focused on this DIY and affordable stuff. Well, the Vitra Furniture Museum asked if they could use my plywood and zip-tie chair, which can be made for about $25 for an exhibition and workshop that teaches people how to design and make. And I may never get to design a Prada store, but I did get to work with supermodel Coco Rocha, who wanted some bucket stools for her own home. And what's great is not that my work is in museums or fancy people's homes. It's that it's desirable to people and institutions that have lots of options, yet attainable to those that don't. And that was the goal all along, to create aspirational things that anyone can afford. But those little projects were trickling up, and the audience was doubling every year, and the bigger opportunities surprisingly came. So we teamed up with a CNC company called Inventables, and they gave us this small machine, and let's see. We made this spiral staircase for my loft in Boston. When I say we, I meant me and my sister. She works for me. The materials and the CNC machine cost less than the cheap prefabricated staircase that my general contractor had recommended. So it was about $800 in plywood. The machine itself is about $1,200. There's a lot of glue and screws though too. And then we published this design online. People can download the files, and now other developers are actually downloading those and CNCing them and putting them into their projects. So 60 million YouTube views is a lot, but we still want to reach more people. And so in addition to giving away our designs, we started to give away the digital content that we were monetizing. So we syndicated our content to larger media companies to publish on their Facebook pages and Instagram accounts. So this was kind of a tough decision because a lot of YouTubers, their money comes from the amount of views that happen on their YouTube channel. Google has this really cool product called AdSense, and they run ads for you, and then they give you half of the money from the ads. So most YouTubers, when they see a Facebook media company sort of take a shorter version of their video and publish on Facebook, aren't too happy about it. So it was a tough decision, but we decided, let's bet on the side of generosity, and we let them post it. So the impact was pretty great. This was a Business Insider post, and I think it did, let's see, this one did 11 million views. And we kept getting more and more, and in just a single month, this one project did over 50 million views. Here's 5 Minute Crafts. They posted a video, and that did 10 million views. And here's Met Dan, which did another 6 million views. And so they kept getting these chunks. By syndicating it, we were getting 6 million views, 10 million views, 20 million views. And when we were talking to the CNC company, we're like, oh yeah, we did like a million views on our channel and another 50 million views on somebody else's channel. And so this is obviously done by a massive team. Just kidding. It's me and my little sister, Jessie, who I brought on as a partner. And then we now have 2 other designers as well. And so our new question is whether we can reach a Super Bowl-sized audience every single month with just a team of 4 people. And we're not quite there yet, but I think in a year or 2, we'll probably be there. So that's about 110 million people, and we think we can do that in a month. So as we grow, we can start to weave in things that we think are important, right? When you're kind of building audience, you kind of have to cater a little bit. So as much as I like to play the sort of independent entrepreneur and make my own rules, that's never really the case. I think at the best, you can be like 80, 90% independent. There's always some little thing that keeps you from doing all the things you want, and that's probably a good thing. So right now, we're again interested in urban food production. We think it's an interesting topic. The technology is making more and more opportunities in this area available, especially with LED lights and moisture sensors. So we've been working on these robotic gardens that allow food to be produced year-round, even if you don't have any windows. So this is the other question I get a lot, is where do you get your inspiration? And as architects, you kind of think that it might be looking from the world's greatest museums, and as entrepreneurs, it might be looking at, reading the Steve Jobs biography or studying the rise of billion-dollar startups. But I think when young people, especially ambitious ones, try to reverse engineer greatness, they find that there's a lot of factors involved that make this pursuit a dependent one. You got to get admitted to a good school. You must find the right internship, network with the right business partners, secure commissions or the investment, and none of these steps are autonomous. All of them require the approval or cooperation from other entities. And so a journey inspired by this type of singular greatness is often a really frustrating one, and I don't think is that advisable. Often a lot of these people aren't always personally the best people to follow. And it's heavily weighted in favor of the wealthy and the privileged. So how many of us have ideas for startups or products or a piece of architecture, but are waiting for an opportunity, investor, or a commission? If we love design and making, why do we wait for permission or for the opportunities, or wait to be commissioned by a client? So I say that just maybe, when you find yourself waiting, you should try changing your source of inspiration. Maybe the inspiration should be about a good next step that would progress the idea, not the master plan that would result in a billion-dollar company. So I suggest finding inspiration in terrible design. It's one of my favorite things. Terrible design and inconvenient services. And I suggest seeking out all the thoughtless and stupid things. And there's plenty of them. They are heavily populating our world. And get inspired just to make them a little bit better. Not great, just a little bit less terrible. It's a much more ergonomic and easy first step. I think a lot of entrepreneurs talk about it in terms of like, oh, find a pay point. I don't even think that, 'cause that's too personal. I have to think like, when was I in pain last? But I say, no. It's much easier to just look around and see all the annoying and terrible things, and take that as a nice, positive, inspirational moment. So, yeah, like relying on greatness for inspiration is kind of like relying on sugar for energy. It was meant to be rare and only for special occasions, but you can't just be, consuming it all the time. And I also think that, the greatness thing, people end up trying to emulate. I know so many people in San Francisco that wear the same outfit every day. And it's not because that's this incredible tactic that actually works for them. It's because someone they admire or that's accomplished what they want does it. That's emulation. That's not creatively looking at what's going to work for you. How do you operate? What's going to streamline your day? That would be creative. No, what they're doing is like they're looking at what other people did that are in the position they want to be and just copying it. And yeah, I don't think that's going to get you too far. So, my other favorite one is the reposting of inspirational thoughts from other people. Like, have you ever met someone like that that's just constantly like inspirational quote? I'm like, wow, man. If you had you had like a lot of epiphanies in like one week. Like that's intense. So, yeah, it's not really the path I would advise too much. So I try to sort of, always be aware of where I'm at. The Guggenheim Foundation hasn't asked me to design a museum yet. Google hasn't asked me if I have any IP they can acquire. And I would like those great opportunities. And I really hope someday I get closer. But in the meantime, I don't want to spend time on proposals or maybes. I simply want to design the opportunities that I control, that I have right now. And I can design what's in my living room, and the opportunity is only really limited by my tolerance for sawdust, which was a big part of the first few years of this. So I believe that good design is a lot rarer than it should be, and I think that good designers are all around us. Everyone I went to design school with was super talented. But when you talk to them now, it's a lot of them aren't really producing work with their name on it that's the work that they want to be producing. They're sort of a part in a firm, and they might have spent the whole week just designing the fire stairs, which is incredibly important for life safety, but not necessarily why they got into design in the first place. So why is there this disconnect? If there's talent all around us, why is good design so rare? I remember watching the first season of American Idol. I'm like, oh wait, there's a lot of people with really good voices. There's a lot of people that can really sing. It's not just a few people that have been elevated into the position where we know their songs. And so I think that this disconnect comes from a business model problem and an inspiration problem. The business model problem is that so many designers adopt a service professional business model where they react to a commission and are compliant to patronage. And the inspiration problem is that good designers often seek inspiration from the rare and anomalous examples of great design rather than the readily available abundance of terrible design. There's so much terrible out there. There's a lot of good designers out there. Let's start picking things up and making them a little bit better piece by piece. So I had this architect friend, also in Brooklyn. I don't know why all the whiny people are in Brooklyn. And he was telling me his theory how poor conservative voters vote for lower taxes for the wealthy because they believe in the capitalist dream and that one day they'll be wealthy. He then, without any sense of irony, told me how exhausted he was from working on a competition entry for the Guggenheim Museum, where thousands of architects were spending hundreds of hours trying to win the design lottery. His apartment was a mess. He was surrounded by IKEA furniture and old takeout, Chinese food packs and stuff like that. He was working about 60 hours a week for his day job and then spending all his extra time on working on these competitions that he never won. And you see the same thing in tech, where smart people are so busy looking for the billion-dollar idea, they step right over $100,000 ideas that could turn into million-dollar ideas. And that's not just an opportunity lost in personal wealth. Those smaller ideas would often directly impact a community that they actually know and are already a member of, and could actually benefit the people that they grew up with or are already familiar with, and still could serve as a stepping stone to something a lot larger. So I love that they're inspired to be great, but what about good? What about better? And what about progress? So I believe in trickle-up design. I'm inspired by the terrible, and hopeful I can make things just a little bit better, or less terrible. I may never author anything that's singularly great, although I'm going to keep trying, and who knows, could get lucky. But even at my most cynical, I'm still pretty confident that I've contributed to thousands of little things that are a little bit better. And I also know that by executing all these small projects that I can complete independently, I'm closer to getting to larger projects with fewer strings attached. And when I stop feeling sorry for, oh wait, funny story, forgot this one. So I don't always take my own advice. I got asked to, a couple of years ago, I got asked to, there's this thing called the Boston Design Biennale. And there's this big greenway in Boston, this big public park. And a friend of mine that's part of the organization, they said, oh, the designs are incredible. You have this following, you should totally submit something for it. I'm like, I don't really submit proposals, man. I got tons of things I can make tomorrow. Why would I spend hours on a PDF that's asking for permission to do something I can already do on my own? He's like, no. We already talked to the group. We want you. You're a lock. Just fill it out. It'll be a cool way that people in the town where you spend the most time can actually touch and interact with the things that you build. So I said, okay, and I filled out the application. It took forever, and applied. And a few months later, they're like, oh, you got honorable mention. Honorable mention is like getting like 4th place in the Olympics. It's like just out of the medals. And so I was annoyed. I was annoyed at myself mostly. But when that sort of subsided, I started thinking, well, what did I really lose? It's not like they're really paying something. It was that feeling of fear of missing out on peer recognition, which is a very real feeling. And instead I was like, wait, I don't need this. I can do my own. So instead I reached out to all my design friends, graphic designers, architects, engineers. I put engineers in those groups. Engineers can be pretty creative. And we started a new organization called Design Cloud, and it's sort of a collective studio where people can experiment with things kind of outside of their day job. So I have all these resources and opportunities for tools and materials from all these innovative companies, and they're always sending me stuff. So we just dump them onto the floor of one of my workshops, and a couple times a month, everyone comes around and just sort of makes things. And people have been making really, really awesome stuff. I think there's furniture designers and engineers that can make awesome installation art. I think there's graphic designers that can make awesome fashion. I know that there's a lot of people that are good at one thing that are also good at cooking. Like, we can do a lot more than what we studied in school. And also, collectively, in sort of doing this, we were all sort of educating each other. If somebody was spending a lot of time working with like leather working and stuff like that, and they might be mixing in like a laser cutter, that kind of information was then informing my sort of furniture designs and stuff. We also realized that we can pretty good at publishing ideas online that could reach way more people than any gallery or exhibition, but we still decided it would be nice to have some physical exhibition space. So we just got 10 acres of land in Joshua Tree, California that we can use for large-scale art installations. And that way we'll never have to ask permission for anyone to do so. We're also now, let's see, redirecting our projects back to the sort of pro bono side. But now with a bigger media following, we can do this in a more sustainable manner and actually generate a lot more funding than we used to be able to do. So I just got back recently from earlier this year in January. I was in Uganda, and I'm working with a nonprofit called Journeyman International, which is really a cool organization. They team up like architects, young architects and engineers with sort of humanitarian projects in need and other nonprofits that are sort of funding it. And then the 3 parties sort of work together to create these things. And it was pretty cool. So I headed over there, met all the people that are going to be going to the school. And what was funny is that they had watched some of my YouTube videos. So there might be a sound, it might be a little bit loud. And this was the sort of welcoming that I got. They made me give a live demo since they had seen the YouTube video, but it takes about 2 hours for a 3-minute YouTube video to load. So they hadn't all seen it, so I had to do a live one. So yeah, that same bucket of stools kind of following me around. So now we're trying to figure out, like, well, how do we build a school? Because obviously, I mean, us coming over there, it's not like we're providing funding for the building, which is incredibly useful, but they can build buildings. So we're really trying to figure out how do we introduce technology that otherwise might not be available. And I was talking to this kid who was wearing, it was such a weird conundrum because he was wearing a Google t-shirt, and you can't really see it all the way. But of course, in some of these rural areas, internet's incredibly slow. And it's not as simple as just getting great internet access. But when I was sort of talking to the kids and sort of thinking about things, in general everybody was sort of happy and healthy and seemed to be enjoying life. But the sort of heartbreaking thing was sort of there seemed to be a ceiling on education. There was a lot of people that I met that had been to college and studied like business administration, and they felt like a little bit betrayed because there was no business administration jobs. And they weren't bitter about it. They met these two brothers, and they're like, oh, so we got really into potato farming, and now we know all about potatoes, and they're doing well as farmers. They're like, I just wish we would have started that earlier, right? But it was sort of seeing that sort of informational gap. And I know that sort of if my design ideas can go all the way over there with a little bit of a stronger signal, maybe we can get some ideas back over or to us. So it's one of the things I don't have answers for yet, but it's going to be part of my work this year, and can't wait to go back and start building. Yeah, I have a lot of these, but this is probably one of my favorites. I really hate the expression "reach for the stars." It's always annoyed me. I think it's like one of the many lies we tell children, along with like, oh, you can be anything you want. Don't reach for the stars. We should never reach for the stars. I think we should find interesting and fun ways to build from the ground up. And if we keep making the things around us better by passionately pursuing progress, I trust that someday we'll suddenly realize that we are higher than we could have ever imagined. And we'll look up from our work and realize that we're actually standing on something pretty great. So here's the homework assignment. It's extra credit, totally optional. Take 1 day a month. 1 day a month is normally enough. And design something where you control the opportunity completely. Not a proposal, not an idea. Design a small thing that you can make happen. Find something in your home that's terrible. Design something that's a little bit better. Make it, experiment, learn from the process. And if you do find something a little bit better, share it with your friends and family. It doesn't have to be furniture or a physical item. It could be a recipe, a line of code, or a piece of music. And I think you'll be surprised how opportunities and impact can trickle up from these little acts of design and making. So do it. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it for the gram, or just because you want the attention and likes. But whatever the motivation is, make sure you don't let any creativity die inside you. Thank you. So we got time for questions. If you can't think of anything now, never email me because I won't ever answer it. But I do normally get to most of the questions I get on Instagram. And that's where I'm at.
So you said you design a new product every week and then you just post it online. What happens to the thing that you design? Do you keep them in your house or what do you do with them?
No, you give them away to friends. If I'm working in Boston, especially in Boston, like my friends there know that they see something on my Facebook or Instagram that they'll DM me and say, like, is that one taken yet? But yeah, no, I think this year we're going to be auctioning them off to fund the school. So it'll be like a quick 1 or 2 day auction and move them all out. And we have gotten some more, a bigger workshop, so we have a little more space to sell them. But yeah, we're going to release the design for the school soon, and we'll be doing a whole bunch of crowdfunding, and we'll probably use a lot of the items that I've built in the last year or so as rewards for that. At least the ones that aren't too heavy to ship. Yes?
So how is Design Cloud different from like a makerspace?
Good question. I think it's because, I don't know, I find that like makerspaces are like kind of cubicles. People all go to their own separate things. What I like is like people sitting around a table talking and bouncing the ideas off of each other. So I'd say makerspaces are more infrastructure. There's definitely, I've been to makerspaces that have awesome communities in them, but a space alone doesn't make community. I think this is really sort of people with a considerable expertise. So at the last sort of session we did, we had 2 people from the sort of shoe industry. There's a ton of actually shoe companies in Boston, like Reebok, New Balance, Puma, and Converse. And we had a bunch of shoe designers that were really interested in designing their own sort of line of leather handbags. And they were experimenting and chatting with some of my engineering friends that are really good at like CAM software and laser etching and stuff like that. And it's also, I think the other thing is trying to also build in that exhibition opportunity, where it's not just tinkering for the sake of tinkering, but tinkering, trying to find a way or something that you could then launch out of it. Yeah.
Where do you see the kind of role of, I hesitate to kind of use the term, but like a formal education versus like a passion-based education? Because you said earlier, you know, like master's degree to YouTube, and there's such an emphasis on, in a sense, like secondary education, like go to school, get a degree in a thing, versus a little bit of what you're kind of trying to do, forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, of just educating the masses of like, hey, yeah, get plywood and a table saw, and you can build some furniture, and you can become a maker, and you can do these. Where do you see a balance being struck, and kind of what is your role in that as well?
So it's funny. So I didn't start undergrad until I was 21. So I had a lot of other endeavors before then. And I always had kind of like a, I don't need this, like kind of attitude. But for me, I did. Academia, particularly in architectural education, it challenged me and softened me up in a lot of ways. I think I was a little bit too cocky, a little bit too arrogant, and I didn't know what I didn't know. I knew that I was really confident that I could achieve whatever I really like focused, but I probably would have just focused on the wrong things. And that sort of intellectual challenging I thought was really beneficial. Absolutely, you do not need a formal education to make a lot of money on the internet. That's undeniable. I think it helps you for figuring out what to do with all that money. Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's afraid to step outside of their comfort zone as far as using, whether it be woodworking tools, CNC, something a little bit more intimidating like metalworking? I saw your one video where you made a shed, like a little workshop for your sister or something like that. And it looked like you were kind of doing solar for the first time there. So what would you say to help overcome those?
I'd itemize the fear, because there's the productive fear and then there's the debilitating ones. So I have a productive fear of working with direct current electrical stuff, because I've been shocked by it before, and unlike AC, it's harder to let go. So it's like oh wait, someone's gonna get me off of this. So I would itemize that, right? A lot of fear of certain power tools or certain industrial processes is incredibly healthy. Like I'm still a little bit apprehensive every time I turn on a table saw, and that's good. But I say itemize it because you want to immediately eliminate the silly ones that aren't actually dangerous. So when you let fear sort of stew together in an unspecified milieu, it's incredibly debilitating and dangerous. Make a list and write down the reasons of why you're afraid of specific things, categorize and design around them. The same way I would say if you don't have access to a lot of tools, categorize the ones, or make a catalog the ones that you have, and then make a list of the things you could do without them. You don't need tools and to build cool stuff, and you certainly can build stuff with all sorts of different fears and phobias. Just be aware of them. Pick the ones you're going to attack, set aside for another days the ones you're going to temporarily embrace, and just keep moving. And right next to you.
Yeah, so I just feel like today, right now, I mean, the only way to, I mean, I don't think it's the only way, but I mean, everything, in order to make money, you have to be good at the internet. Like, you just have to. And I feel like you have to create this content, and I mean, you have your products, but then you create this content, and it's going to reach, like, and I think that's where I'm like, who are the young, do you have any suggestions of people who are like, the young people, like my young entrepreneurs who are like just starting in this like saturated market environment right now, trying to produce this stuff, but then like you have the internet, and it's like there's SEO, like you have to be good with the internet to make
No, you don't.
you don't?
Absolutely not. Nope. And exactly, so there's all sorts of ways, right? And I think billboards are an incredibly underrated ad resource right now, particularly because ad spend's all going to the internet and everyone's trying to like micromanage it and get like another fraction of a cent better ROI on their Facebook ad campaign. And meanwhile, because they're spending so much energy there, they're forgetting that, oh wait, how many cars drive past this every day? They're not looking at actual traffic. You know what traffic used to be? So when anytime, the first part you said, it seems like everyone has to be good at this. That's great. You can identify the sort of micro trend. Not all audience sizes are equally valuable. I know a ton of woodworkers that are incredibly good, and they've decided, I don't like having a big audience. So you know what they do? Is they have a deep audience. They really want to focus on just the craft, and they don't want to focus on self-promotion. And they do incredibly well, because what they do is they then have a workshop where they invite 10 people a month into their workshop. They come in for a weekend, and they charge thousands of dollars for that. So they only have to reach 100 people a year. And they're making an incredible living doing that. You talk to a lot of people in the food industry. You don't have to have the next Shake Shack or the next sort of food truck franchise to do well. You can focus on local craft. Then also within the internet itself, there's all sorts of differences between regional and national. If you are, a lot of these big sort of media companies are focusing on national reach, which means, and so if you look at SEO in that way, oh yeah, it's very, if you were to try to compete and, so for example, if, let's say you're really into smart home technology, and you were to try to win those sort of search terms, you'd be competing with the biggest companies in the world, and you would lose, and it wouldn't be close. But if you said, I want to own the SEO for smart homes in Lancaster, in a local area, how many people are you competing against? I bet you no one has that website, or right. I actually know a lot of people that do just that. Is that they used to work in consulting, focusing on national sort of marketing campaigns, and they got a little bit outdated on the technology, and then they switched to regional, and now they're killing it. So one guy I know, all he does is go around into different regions and figures out how to be really good at mold removal and then the name of the city, right? So what he's doing is he's not competing against any national company that's doing that. He spends the time in the area, so he gets to know all the different regions and sub-regions and downtown versus uptown and all these things that are specific, and then uses that localized knowledge to beat out anyone national. So there's always, anytime things start to sort of level out and become like a trend, there's always opportunity underneath that on the sort of regressive sort of thing against it. And if it's not the thing that you personally like, don't. I mean, the best thing about being an entrepreneur isn't saying, okay, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a YouTuber, or I'm a person that's defined by this platform. No. The best thing about it is doing that sort of inventory of what you're good at and then building your plan around your own competitive advantages. You, and then you.
There's a small group of woodworkers on YouTube here.
Yeah, I recognize some of you.
I would be interested if you could talk just a little bit about the production and the publishing of the videos. You said there's 4 people in your crew. Like, do you shoot the video? Do you edit the video? Do you do the
So most YouTubers that are sort of at my sort of size of audience, they'll be sort of the on-air personality, and then they'll have like a camera guy and maybe an editor, and then maybe like a sort of a go-for sort of a assistant type person. That's probably the most efficient way to do it. It's not how I do it, because I don't want to be in meetings ever, right? So I do it more modular, and it's not as efficient, but it's the way I enjoy working, where everyone on my team designs their own projects. I mean, we'll talk about ideas and throw them around at lunch and stuff like that, because that's fun. But they design their own projects, they go pick up their own materials, they shoot their own stuff, they edit their own stuff, and they do all the posting themselves as well. And we probably lose about 10 to 20% efficiency on that. But if I'm going to do this my way, I'm going to eliminate the parts that annoy me and that take away a little bit of satisfaction. It's also the reason why I don't do a lot of talking on camera in my videos. Is another sort of scaling problem that a lot of YouTube people have is that it becomes so much about them as an individual that they then have to just be like running around in front of different cameras and posing and doing stuff just to maximize the amount of content they do. I may have taken a little bit of a hit in terms of audience growth for that, but now it's like I can leave and go work on a bigger project for months at a time, and I have other people that can produce stuff for my channels independently. So I'm not a slave to my own publishing schedule. And that's worth, to me, way more than like a little bump in audience growth. And for production, my editing is much faster because I'm impatient. My sister's editing and Jamie, one of our designers, their editing is much more precise, and they'll even time the cuts to the beats of the background music and stuff like that. I'm just like, I don't notice that, so I'm not going to do it. You.
So, you talked about even for when you started college a little bit later, and then starting starting the big consulting business, designing business, and then switching your business model. So
we didn't switch it. We still have. I'm still a partner and co-owner in ZeroEnergy Design. I just don't take a salary or practice actively.
Okay.
Yeah.
So adding, I should say.
Yeah.
Adding this other outlet. Could you talk more maybe about just as far as obstacle? I know, maybe is it for you personally, was it more just the fear of regret or the fear of having to be complacent was enough for you to kind of take that risk in of itself? Or, is it something maybe like how did you overcome even maybe starting the big firm, the firm to begin with and all of that, just getting into that? So
risk is an interesting thing because it's often more of an assumption than an actual calculation. If you are married with children and you have a mortgage that you're just barely making, risk is a very different thing than if you're right out of college. And then the other sort of risk that I think that is the one that most people actually allude to is the risk of not having a good explanation for your decisions to the people you care about. So for me, it's like I know the people that care about me will understand. I didn't feel like I really had that much to lose. Like, you can always go back. It was funny. I was talking to Bob Claggett he has a really cool channel called I Like to Make Stuff. Just a brilliant guy. He has like a tech and software background. Has built up companies, sold them to Dell, done really well for himself. And he was sort of talking about how he was sort of risking, and he has a family and kids and stuff, so in a much different situation than me. And he was talking about, he's like, if I go full time and do this, like I'm risking. And he said his wife told him, like, well, if it doesn't work, you can get another job in software and tech. So, when you actually look at the floor and see like this is the worst case scenario and kind of revel in it and be like, yeah, that's not ideal. But I know that in college I lived off of Top Ramen and slept on sofas and had a blast. So I'm pretty sure I could do it again if I had to. Yes.
Just tell her to do it.
Yeah. But no, I would say, again, really, really dissect what it is. And you'll often find that there's not actually that much substance there. Yeah.
How important have analytics in your relationships with sponsors to your inspiration?
Important at the broad level, not important at the detailed level. So I'll use analytics to keep me from making emotional decisions, right? So if I post something and I look at a YouTube comment, and sometimes they're mean, it's very easy to make an emotional reaction and think that people don't like you or they don't like what you just posted, right? And you'll feel the cortisol spike and you'll feel yourself having a physiological reaction to it. That's when I'll use analytics. I'll be like, okay, so if 100,000 people have watched this video so far and 1,000 people have commented it, and if 2 of those 1,000 comments were really, really mean, okay, now I have a little bit of mathematical perspective on that. Analytics are really good in that. Then I also look at, did those people that said mean things, did they unsubscribe from me? Oh, they didn't. Well, that's great, because that means I'm still making money off of them, and their engagement is actually helping me with with YouTube's algorithm. So it's similar to that, where it's like you have the feeling and the emotion, but then you take inventory, and that's when I really like to use analytics. I don't really get that deep into terms of like directing creative behavior, because I find that there's a lot of confusion of sort of causation versus correlation. But I'll use them to sort of reframe my perspective and keep me from making an emotional reaction to something. Yeah.
You do a lot, you have your videos, you're doing stuff in Africa, and I know you have a podcast, so I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff that you like to get your hands into. Do you ever feel that it's draining or that you're overwhelmed? And also, what do you like to do in your downtime to just kind of relax and take your mind off?
So my approach to sort of work-life balance is I never expect to have it on any day or any moment. I do care that I have it over the course of a year. So that's, for me, that's the measure of how I look at balance. Is right around, I have this thing like right before Thanksgiving, I'll normally go like hiking and climbing in Joshua Tree with a bunch of friends. And it's great, sit by the fire, sort of chat about it. And that's when I'll normally take inventory of like, and it's a good time too, because it's like right before Thanksgiving. So you can kind of like make your plans of a holiday and then figure out what you're going to do to start out the new year. So I care about that balance over the course of a year, but I don't care about it any one week. I don't want life to be this. I want it to be this. So I also know that, well, I think like most people, I can be very lazy and very unmotivated if I don't see a path for how my action really matters. If I don't see that I'm really moving the needle, and this has happened at times, I felt like when I was still excited about where things were going with sort of my digital content career, but it didn't really feel like, it felt like it was on a track. Like I felt like whether I worked really hard or worked a little bit, it was growing at about the same rate. I tend to slack off in those moments, and I think that's okay. But the minute I sort of see, wait, here's how an intentional exertion of me sort of pushing down on the gas pedal can change the direction of things, that's where my motivation goes through the roof, and I can work incredibly hard. So the way I look at it is you don't always get to see those moments where your effort is really changing your direction. So that's rare. Anytime, and because that's really when you're in most control of your own life. It's like, wow, if I work this hard, it's actually making a huge difference for me. So I love that moment. And so I savor that, but it tends to level off. You tend to peak and then plateau again. And that's when I know that I'll rest, is when I don't see a clear thing. I also know that when I am in one of those moments where I'm not really growing in the ways that I should, that's a good time to take some time off and to try some new experiences, to travel a little bit, see some new things. That was a little bit of my sort of, one of the other sort of selfish reasons for wanting to go to Uganda. It's like, I'm going to learn a lot by being in a different visual environment. And I did. I learned a ton about welding because people there are always fixing everything that they own. I got a ton of ideas about how to recycle plastics and stuff like that, because it makes economic sense to do that, so people investigate it on a DIY level. So I think that it's like, I don't really think that, it's like if you were a writer or you wouldn't just rely on your imagination for getting material. You would go out and experience things. I mean, I don't think that Hemingway was necessarily so creative. It's just like, well, he went and did a lot of crazy stuff and then wrote about some of it. Let's do one more. Actually, two more. You, and then you. So I'm collecting them all right now to make a chandelier of death, is one of the ideas. But no, if you search on YouTube, like what to do with old saw blades, there's a lot of people that turned them into like pocket knives or knives or stuff like that and recycle them. Because yeah, it is actually, it's, you know, just the teeth get dull on the outside, but most of the steel is valuable. Okay, last one.
So what professional do you hire to help you run your business? Anybody?
I mean, so I don't hire them as like in-house employees, but I use a lot of professional services. I have, you know, a lawyer, accountant that I owe some documents to, and you know, anytime I can sit down with someone that does something on a daily basis that I only have a little bit of information from, I'm definitely excited to pick their brain. But those are the two that I interact with the most. All right. Well, I'll be around for a little bit, so you can come hit me up with questions. Thank you.